All right. All right, we're going to go ahead and start day 4 of camp. I'm doing a little thing here just because it's sort of a camp thing. I don't know if you saw that or heard that. All right, everyone. Welcome to day 4 of the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission Grant Camp Week. Today we packed the agenda. We're going to be talking about broadband, rural development, have great speakers here assembled today. We'll keep our cameras off unless you're speaking. And just a reminder, we will give everyone the slide deck link, and we're recording this, so you can also watch it later if you'd like, or have other people watch it. So I think without any further ado, I'm going to open up the session here with our very first one, which will be the U.S. Community Development. And we have with us Josh Smith from U.S. Ohio Rural Development Community Programs. Josh, you go ahead. Let me click advance here. I've just to the opening and I'll click for you, Josh. Welcome and take it away.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much, Eileen. Happy to be here. Okay. So am I going to go ahead and share my screen, or are you going to pop over to mine? There it is.
I will click for you.
All right, cool. Well, hang on this one for a little second. So as mentioned, my name is Josh. I work for USDA Rural Development here. I work out of our state office in Columbus. I'm a community programs loan assistant, so I'm here to support our area offices as they are, getting applications in. I assist some of our environmental reviews here for applications, and I also process applications as they come in. So a little bit of a background on USDA Rural Development. It's one of many different areas of work that the U.S. Department of Ag works on. We, surprisingly enough, don't really work on much with food. We primarily just do business development, community development. There's 3 different program areas within USDA Rural Development: the Rural Housing Service, Rural Business Service, and Rural Utilities Service. Anthony and I do work under Rural Utilities Service, and I also help out with the rural housing in our community facilities area of work. For our programs, a rural area is defined as any community under 50,000 in population. For our direct programs for community facilities and water and waste, community facilities is under 20,000 in population. Water is going to be under 10,000 in population. But we can serve communities up to 50K with our loan guarantees. So with that, Eileen, if you want to go to the next slide. Okay. Make sure that I advance my notes here. So I'm going to start with our community facilities program. This is here to help develop the public safety needs or just community well-being needs that you would have in your town or village or city. This can fund hospitals, health clinics, schools, daycares, nurseries, firehouses, police stations as well. We do direct loan funding as well as grant funding, and that'll be, a lot of what we talk about today, because this is grant camp, right? So we want to get the good stuff. If you want to do next slide, Eileen. All right. So as mentioned, funds can be direct. We also do grant. We can also work with private lenders to do loan guarantees. Funds can be used to purchase or construct and improve community facilities, do equipment as well. We've been doing a lot of equipment recently. We have low interest direct loans, and we can do a combination of the two when we work on a project. We can also combine with several different partners. So if you do have commercial financing available, we can go in with that. So in Ohio, the way that our grant funding works, we have a maximum of 75% of the project or 100K, and it's going to be whichever is lower, and that is determined by your MHI compared to the state non-metropolitan MHI. Applications for our programs are submitted year-round and usually are awarded on a first-come, first-served basis. Now, keep in mind that we have a fiscal year that ends on September 30th. And then at that point, our funding goes into the void of Washington, D.C. and goes back to Congress, and then we have to wait to then get our appropriations back through a budget. So getting funding from October 1st to December 31st can be pretty difficult. And usually about now is when we start to pool our funds. So it can get a little bit harder, can take a little bit more time. And when we say pool, it goes into a national pool that everyone draws from rather than the states having their own funds. Additional grants that we have available, we can do grants known as like Rural Community Development Initiative, or RCDI, or CFTAT, our Technical Assistance and Training Grant. These can be used for projects such as, planning out your community, or if you want to fund training for something going on, we can do that. Now, keep in mind that when we do grants, and this is also going to apply for our water and waste, we try to avoid putting it into any kind of real estate, because that is going to if the building gets sold or the real estate gets sold, we need to have the grant funds back, because we always want to make sure that the funds are used for what we were initially putting them into. So Eileen, next slide. So advantages. It's a great complement to any kind of community development projects that you were doing, as I mentioned earlier, and easy terms designed for rural communities with limited resources. We can do terms up to the maximum that's allowable in Ohio, and our current rate for community facilities is a 2.25. That's our lowest rate. Most communities are eligible for that rate. Our highest is going to be 4.5%, and that's for communities at poverty level. And for the lower 48, poverty level is, I believe, 25,600. Okay, next slide, Eileen. All right. Those who can apply for CF are going to be public bodies, not-for-profits, and federally recognized Indian tribes. We do not have any Native American tribes that are recognized here in Ohio, so we don't get to work with them much. But this is who can apply for these programs. Next slide. And then, yeah, as I mentioned earlier, our definition for rural is under 50. Our sub-definition of truly rural goes into 20,000 for CF or 10,000 for WEP, and this is based upon 2010 census data. This data is going to be updated. I think last I heard it's going to be sometime in the last quarter of this calendar year, or maybe even later, going into 2022. So this is likely to change pretty soon. When we hit the end of our funding year, and we get multiple applications at a time and we're running low on funds, we do start to do competitive scoring. So we will prioritize low income communities that have lower MHIs and smaller populations than those that have larger. We do accept applications year round. So you can always submit an application and we can always work with you, but just keep in mind that funding availability, can be spotty. So just keep that in mind. And next slide. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and get into part 2, which is water environmental programs. Next slide. So this can be used to improve your water infrastructure, support public health and safety, promote economic development, and we also do have, like the RCDI I mentioned earlier and the community facilities technical and training, we have a similar program for WEP known as the Solid Waste Management Grant. So first, for the rest, we could do direct loans, grants, loan guarantees as well for populations up to 50K, but for direct, it has to be under 10 for us. These are based upon MHI, but they don't have a hard cap in terms of dollar amount. Communities that hit that are below 80% and below 80% of the state non-metropolitan MHI. There we go. And have a identified health and safety issue can be eligible for up to 75% in grant funding. But again, this usually means that there has to be a finding, and this is usually done by the EPA. If you are between 80% or 100% of the state non-metropolitan MHI, you can get 45% of grant funding. Anything above that, we can just do direct. And again, grant funding is based upon what we have available and allocated to us. So it's not going to be an automatic 45 or 75. We have pre-planning programs available. So like I mentioned, the solid waste management grant, which can do training, and also waste management funding programs. So we have a couple agencies, nonprofits that have worked on, they would go to schools and train kids on how to recycle properly, or they do some like river cleanup or waste recycling, sorting, and things like that. So we've been able to fund those projects. Next slide. So funding for WEP is all encompassing, so it can fund the vast majority of your expenses. Anything that you want to have funded needs to be done after we start doing, or after we obligate our funding. We don't want to have anything that you've started that you're then going to put an application for. We're not going to fund. So just keep that in mind. But we can do legal and engineering fees, land acquisition, but remember, we're not going to put grant into the land. But any equipment that you have, we can go ahead and fund that with grant money. We can finance startup operations and maintenance, and also purchase existing facilities if you're trying to get a new one. Now, we do have terms that go up to 40 years, and interest rates for this go as low as 1.375, and the rates for WEP are highest at 2.25. We can also work with several agencies together to combine funding. So we very frequently will work with EPA, OWDA, Ohio Public Works Commission to do one big funding package and come together as a team. So that is available. We do have RD Apply. This is our online application system. It's only good for our WEP projects and also Anthony's telecom projects. So any CF applications have to be done through paper. You do still have an option to do paper applications for WEP, but this would be our website. If you have any questions, contact me, because I am our administrator for this website for WEP. This is our regional map. So in central Ohio, whichever corner you are in, that's going to be the office that you would call. Here in the state office, we don't service any of CF or WEP projects. It's primarily going to be one of the area offices, but this is our service area. And then last slide. Here is my contact information, as well as the contact information for my boss, Charles Dietz, who's our community programs director. And if you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out.
Thank you, Josh. Boy, the 50,000, that's almost every city, just about in our suburban ring.
Yeah.
Would qualify. All right, very good. Okay, thank you so much. We're going to move on to Anthony Tyndall from USRDA. And Anthony, take it away.
Okay, thank you very much, Eileen. As Eileen mentioned, my name is Anthony Tyndall. I go by Tony as well. I am the general field representative for the telecom program for Rural Utilities Service. I cover Ohio, Michigan, and Indiana. You can go ahead and go to the next slide, Eileen. So I want to start the presentation by saying that USDA is not an internet service provider. We cannot come out to your house and hook up internet. We don't provide internet services directly to end users. And we also do not offer loans or grants directly to end users to pay the costs associated with bringing internet services to their homes. So I hear the story a lot that, ABC cable company has facilities that are located a half a mile down the road from my house. I called them up and they sent somebody out. They told me that it was going to be some ridiculous amount of money to bring those facilities to my door, and they ask if we can help them pay those costs. And unfortunately, we don't have programs that will allow us to work directly with end users to pay those costs. What we can do is make loans or grants to public and private entities to build broadband networks in rural areas. And then those entities actually deliver internet services over those networks that we fund. So the four programs that I'm going to talk about briefly today are the Reconnect Loan and Grant Program, the Infrastructure Loan Program, Community Connect Grant Program, and then finally the Distance Learning and Telemedicine Grant Program. Next slide, please. So Reconnect is our newest program. It was established under the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2018. We've had a couple of rounds of funding already under that program. We've made 77 awards under round one. We actually made 106 awards under round two. And we do expect that the funding opportunity announcement for round three will be published sometime in the late summer or early fall is the expectation. Let's look at this. Next slide. Oh, no, sorry, stay on that side. So similar to the first two rounds, under round three, we are expecting three separate funding categories. We do expect that there will be 100% loans, 100% grants, and then a 50-50 loan grant combination. And then basically any entity that's legally organized as anything other than a sole proprietorship or a partnership is eligible to apply. Next slide. So the funds may be used to construct, improve, or acquire facilities that are used to provide broadband service. There are a couple of qualifiers for acquisitions. First of all, any system that you're proposing to acquire cannot be providing sufficient broadband service. And then the requirements in the past, at least, have been that the acquisition portion of any project must be limited to 40% of the award. Next slide. Okay, so the infrastructure loan program is our oldest loan program. We've actually been making loans under this program since 1949. Whereas Reconnect, the definition of rural for Reconnect is 20,000 or under, or that has been the definition at least. We're going through these changes, and we'll see what comes out of the next funding opportunity announcement. But with the infrastructure loan program, it's targeted to rural areas with a population of 5,000 or less. And it too is used to construct, improve, and acquire facilities that are used to provide broadband service. And then refinancing is also, it's got to be outside debt, but that's also an option that's available under this program. Next slide. Okay, so there are a couple different types of loans that are available. Cost of money loans that are made at the U.S. Treasury rate, and then loans that are guaranteed by the Federal Financing Bank. Next slide. And again, the one thing that sets this program apart from the others is that due to the language in the statute and the regulations, its use is generally limited to incumbent local exchange carriers or ILECs to upgrade the facilities that are located within their ILEC footprints or service areas. So if you don't know what an ILEC is, you're probably not going to be eligible to apply for the infrastructure loan program. Next slide. Okay, Community Connect Grant Program. It's a 100% grant program that's used to fund broadband networks in the most rural, most in-need areas of the country. So in order to be eligible, an area must completely lack any access to broadband service whatsoever. And most recently, we've been using 10 megabits down, 1 megabit up as the threshold to define what is and is not broadband for that program. Now, that may change going forward, but as of right now, that's the definition that we've used to define broadband. So the primary difference with this program is the need to provide free broadband service to the critical community facilities that are located within the proposed funded service area for 2 years. So when we're talking about critical community facilities, we're talking about fire department, police department, ambulance, and the like, as well as the need to establish a community center where free broadband service is available. So you have to, I think the rules say you have to provide a couple different computer access, couple different computers at least, and wireless access so that people can use their own computers to access the internet at the community center. And then applicants are required to provide at least 15% match for this program. Next slide. Okay, and again, who's eligible for Community Connect grants? This is basically the same as all of our programs. Essentially, if you're not a sole proprietorship or a partnership, if you're legally organized as any other entity, you will very likely, at least from an eligibility standpoint, for the entity, you'll be eligible. Next slide. Okay, and finally, the Distance Learning and Telemedicine Grant Program is also a 100% grant program, but it's a little bit of a one-off for us in that it's generally not a program that's used to fund the construction of broadband networks in rural areas. Rather, it's generally used by schools, libraries, hospitals, medical clinics, and the like to fund distance learning or telemedicine equipment that connects to the broadband network and is then used to provide DLT services in rural areas. And again, applicants are required to provide at least 15% match. So essentially, it's as you can see on the slide here, it's to buy the equipment. You can use some of the funding for instructional programming. Technical assistance is allowed as well. I think technical assistance is limited to 10% of the award. And then, broadband facilities are a possibility. That's something that's fairly new with this program, but it's limited to 20%. And all of the grant-funded equipment, whether it be a piece of hardware or software, or actually broadband facilities, a stretch of fiber optic cable, must be owned by the grantee. Next slide. So again, it's a 100% grant program. It is a very popular program. We get a lot of applications under every funding window. We have to go through an initial eligibility and completeness review. Those applications that make it through that initial review go on for both a objective and subjective scoring process, and ultimately the best scoring applications are awarded. Next slide. And again, basically for this particular program, at least, it's normally, we get a lot of colleges and universities, high schools, hospitals, medical clinics. Those are the types of entities that are generally applying for this program. Next slide. I think that's so my contact information is there. If you have any questions about any of these programs, certainly feel free to reach out.
Hi, Anthony. Very, very good. I noticed also in the rural community, we have a lot of retirement centers, senior centers. Would those also qualify for the telelearning?
Yeah, we do get, oftentimes we do see nursing homes, retirement homes that are included as end user sites in those applications.
Great. And then could a government be considered a community center if they wanted to make that option available?
The community center, there's a lot of different ways that an applicant can meet that requirement. You can actually, propose building a community center as a part of the project. You could use a mobile type. I mean, we've seen mobile types of facilities being used as a community center. But yeah, if a government has, some room in the library, a fire hall, we've seen a number of different buildings being used to satisfy that community center requirement.
Okay, very good. Good to know. All right. Any other questions? Go ahead and throw them in the chat. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you so much. This is
Thank you.
a lot to digest here, but almost everybody can certainly benefit by these. So thank you very much. We're going to get ready to move on. And just so everybody knows, we are recording. We will share the links to the recordings and the slides, and you're going to get an evaluation. Those will all be put out there next week, and then all that link will go out to all the registrants. So if you forgot to register, let me know your email so I get you in that list. All right, we're going to go right on here, and we're going to move into broadband in the Central Ohio region. So we have Aaron Schill, the Director of Data and Mapping at MORPC, and we have Amy Huffman, National Digital Inclusion Alliance. So take it away, gang. Or Aaron, you want to take over?
Great. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining us this morning. I'm going to share my screen here. It'll be the same slides, but I'll run the slide deck. And Amy, just let me know if you want to just give me a heads up, I can switch them for your portion. So if I can just get a thumbs up, are you all seeing the title slide for NDIA? All right, great. And take it away.
Good morning, everyone. It's so nice to be here with you, and thank you to Aaron and Eileen for having me. I'm Amy Huffman. I'm the Policy Director for the National Digital Inclusion Alliance. I'm going to just give a brief overview of who we are, and then we'll jump right into policy and funding. Next slide. So we are as you can see, a unified voice for folks like you across the country. So local governments, schools, libraries, people on the ground doing digital inclusion and digital equity work, the hard work of making sure people have devices, access to affordable internet, and the tools and training that they need to participate in today's digital economy. We have over 550 affiliates across 44 states and a few of the territories. Next slide, please. And we're a community of practitioners, so the boots on the ground doing this hard work. Next slide, please. Academics, we have lots of researchers in our community doing great work to help us advance the field. Next slide. Advocates, so people working to make sure that policies and programs are passed at the state and federal level and local level that advance digital equity and digital inclusion. Next slide. And we do all of our work through a mix of supporting practitioners like you, raising awareness around what the digital divide is, what digital equity is, what digital inclusion is, why it matters. We do some data and research, and all of this informs our policy work. So we work at both the federal and sometimes we're moving more into the state level of advancing policies that work to close the digital divide. Next slide. So today I'm here to talk about a few of, this is not a comprehensive list, but a few of the funding opportunities that have pretty much come out of the recovery efforts to address the pandemic. As you all are keenly aware, the digital divide existed long before COVID, but COVID just really brought to light the issues in a new way for folks that maybe hadn't been paying attention. And some of those folks were our federal lawmakers, and they, to their credit, have acted swiftly and included funding for digital inclusion and digital equity work and expanding broadband access in their federal recovery bills. So real briefly, I just do want to pause and give a couple definitions that I failed to go over. So when we talk about broadband access, we're talking about a lot of what USDA was just going over, extending access in rural areas, making sure that unserved folks have the access that they need to actually connect to the internet. The National Digital Inclusion Alliance, we tend to work on digital, making sure that internet is affordable, that people have devices and also have the skills and the support that they need to access the internet. So that's more digital inclusion. Digital equity is our goal. We all want to reach digital equity. We want to make sure everyone has all of them that they need to thrive and that the digital divide is closed. And digital inclusion is how we get there. It's the programs, the policies, and tools. All right, so back to our funding, we're going to briefly go over 4 kind of big pots of funding that we're aware of. There are others, just so you know, particularly, long-standing programs like the USDA programs that were just gone over. Appalachian Regional Commission has some funding programs, and the FCC has some funding programs. We're not really going to touch on those today, and we're going to talk about mostly what was implemented through the COVID relief. Next slide, please. So the first that we're going to talk about is emergency broadband benefit. You might have heard of this already, but it was a $3.2 billion federal fund that was delegated to the Federal Communications Commission from Congress. This gets directly at the cost issues. So this is basically a $50 a month subsidy for qualifying households and $75 subsidy for qualifying households in tribal areas. The program launched May 12th. It is a temporary program. That might be the most important thing I tell you today. If you don't hear anything else, it's temporary. It is as I said, is $3.2 billion fund. And when those $3.2 billion are expended, the program ends. Now there is a hope and work at the federal level, and we're amongst the groups pushing for this, that Congress provide a bridge funding to continue this program should the funds run out prior to a permanent broadband benefit being implemented. We're also pushing for permanent broadband benefit that would take lessons learned from this program and continue to provide support for households who can't afford access. Next slide, please. Actually, this needs updating. In the first week alone, over 1 million households have enrolled in the program. And at this point, we're about a month in, and over 2 million households have been enrolled in the program. We are waiting for more granular data from the Federal Communications Commission. However, they do have data currently available on how many signups are happening in each state. So if you're interested, I will drop a link in the chat in a moment to make sure you can look at that. Oh, by the way, Ohio is doing really well in signing up folks. Ohio is only third to California and New York. So y'all are doing really great work in getting folks connected. There are some challenges that we've...
Amy, not to nitpick, but Ohio's second.
No. Thank you for nitpicking.
Just for people to give people a sense, we've had about 150,000 households in Ohio sign up for this so far.
Which is fabulous, right? That's just absolutely fabulous. So keep up the great work. There have been some challenges that have come to light, I'll say, since the program's launch. To their credit, the FCC and their subsidiary who runs the programs, which is USAC is the acronym, or Universal Service Administration Corporation, they stood this program up very quickly in 90, 60 days. So as expected with a new program, there are some challenges and opportunities for improvement that we're seeing. Among them, some opt-in challenges with the providers, meaning some households are being told they need to opt in to stay with the provider after the benefit ends. That wasn't in the spirit of the law. So those things are being worked out now. But we and other groups are taking the things that we're learning about what's going on in the ground from folks like you and taking those to USAC and FCC, and they are working on improving the program in real time. And then we are also taking those lessons learned as we inform and advocate for a permanent broadband benefit. Next slide, please. Next up, we have the Emergency Connectivity Fund. This was a nearly $7.2 billion provision that was allocated in the American Rescue Plan Act. It directly reimburses schools and libraries for providing free broadband service or devices to households, or households, K-12 households or patrons at libraries. It is forthcoming. We don't anticipate to see this actually kind of be implemented until this fall. Through this program, we do think bulk purchase agreements are possible, meaning a school or library could get a sole source contract with a provider, internet service provider, and then say they get a 20 subscriptions in that package, then they could, households could, in their, say it's for a school, 20 households from that school could use those subscriptions. So things like that are possible under the Emergency Connectivity Fund. But you'll need to work directly with your schools and libraries on that. Next slide, please. Next up, we have what might be the most exciting and also perhaps the most complicated is the American Rescue Plan Act. And specifically within that act, there's obviously a lot of different parts of that act, but specifically we're looking at two sections today, Section 602, which is the Coronavirus State Fiscal Recovery Fund, and then the Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery Fund. In these sections, there's $350 billion for state and local governments to do a variety of things, right? So it can be, these funds can be used for anything from supporting households who lost loved ones during the coronavirus pandemic, in helping pay for funerals. It can be, allocated towards affordable housing, rent assistance, all sorts of things. But digital inclusion, what was exciting for us is that digital inclusion and broadband activities were included in these state and local fiscal recovery funds from the Treasury. In their guidance, the Treasury gave guidance and noted specifically digital inclusion and broadband as eligible activities. And those things in terms of digital inclusion can look like cover subsidies for households for broadband service. It could just be paying for the outreach to let people know about things like the emergency broadband benefit. It could be digital literacy training. So our standard, come into a classroom, get some training on how to use your computer. It could be digital navigation, which is a model that arose and came to prominence under the pandemic, which is basically, it's like a healthcare navigator, having somebody on the phone walk you through from point A to point B to point C, how to get connected, how to find a computer lab, how to find a computer, all sorts of things like that. It could even be purchasing devices for households. And then there is funding available for broadband infrastructure, both under the state and local recovery funds. And the rules around that are a bit more specific than the digital inclusion rules, but I'd encourage you to review those things if you're interested in those. And I'll make sure to drop a link to the blog post that we wrote on this in the chat so you have that information. Next slide. Oh, I already went over this. Next slide. All right, finally, we have the Consolidated Appropriations Act. This allocated $288 million for a broadband infrastructure program. This program is being run out of the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, which is within the U.S. Department of Commerce. So it's an executive branch agency. Historically, they've run several broadband grant programs, particularly during the last recovery from the 08-09 recession. Awards will be anywhere between $5 and $30 million. Although when I was reading about it, they did take care to note that, if you're going to request above that, you just have to have good justification for that. This one's a bit different than USDA's programs or other programs in that eligible applicants are covered partnerships. And this is sort of new, which means it's a partnership between a state or one or more political subdivisions and a fixed internet service provider. So the state and the fixed internet service provider have to apply together. It is for eligible areas are unserved by 25.3 that are also not going to be served by other grant funds. There's a lot more language around that and a lot more details about what's eligible and what's not. I'll spare you those details right now, but happy to answer any questions that you might have about that.
Next. And Amy, can we maybe add just a couple other pieces for communities to think about? One is fixed internet service provider can be both a traditional provider like a cable or telecom company. It could also be fixed wireless. So in Ohio, there are some examples of communities, I'm not sure if we have any on the call, but that have set up partnerships with a fixed wireless provider. So there's an antenna that is set up and provides wireless signal like a CBRS to a modem in someone's house, a receiver in somebody's house. So that doesn't actually have to be fixed internet, does not necessarily mean wired internet. And we can provide more details on that, but I think that's an important distinction. And then the other key distinction under eligible areas is in this case, there only needs to be one household that is unserved by 25.3 broadband in order for an area to be eligible. So there are some other federal programs and some of the mapping that kind of takes the opposite approach, that they consider an area served if one household is served. For this particular program, you just need one household that is not served for that area to be eligible. That said, they give priority to the more households that are gaining service through a grant application. So that's one of the evaluation criteria. But when you think about eligible areas, you can extend it to areas where just one household isn't served.
Thank you, Aaron. Those are great. And I think that's it for me. Next slide. Oh, this is a handy chart that the Brookings Institution put together to help think through all the different ways that all these different funds can be deployed and work together. So how they can sort of be layered and stacked on top of each other. I apologize. I know it's not the best to look at it. It's sort of smushed. But I will also drop a link in the chat to this article that you can have and grab the chart yourselves to look at. But it just gives sort of a breakdown of which of these funds can be used for physical network build out, which can be used for device support, which can be used for subscription support, which means directly to the households, and which can be used for digital literacy training. So that as you're thinking through how to best leverage these federal funds for your local efforts, you have just a quick snapshot of what this could look like in your local governments. Next slide. Yes, and thank you for having me today. And I'm going to be here and happy to answer questions once Aaron has finished up his portion.
All right, thanks, Amy. And that's an excellent overview. I have mentioned a few times to commission members and on some other calls that MORPC is looking to put together a matrix of different funding programs. Brookings did a lot of our work for us for the American Rescue Plan programs, at least. So we'll get that out. If there are some additional resources that we need to pull together for other funding programs, we do still intend to do that. But that's a really great start. And I think covers a lot of the things that you're kind of hearing about in different conversations. What I'm going to do now is just touch on a few other more local and applicable funding opportunities, grant programs. And then I want to touch briefly as well on some kind of late-breaking items that are so recent they didn't even make it into our slide deck. So I'll quickly cover the ones you see on here. I think most folks are familiar with House Bill 2, which passed the legislature here in Ohio just about a month ago now. It's the Ohio Residential Broadband Expansion Grant Program, and it appropriates $20 million. It is very similar to the infrastructure grant program that Amy just mentioned, but here in the state. It places priority on unserved areas, but also there are eligible areas that are considered underserved. And what we mean by that, unserved is an area that has anything less than, so no connectivity at all, up to 10 megabit download and 1 megabit upload bandwidths. That's considered unserved, anything below that threshold. Anything between 10.1 and 25.3 is considered underserved. Priority is given to areas that have no connectivity at all, but those areas that are between 10.1 and 25.3 are considered underserved and are eligible for funding. That's important because in a lot of our rural communities, there may be kind of legacy cable providers or phone providers that provide like DSL service or kind of outdated coaxial or even copper line service that is frankly aging and does not meet the broadband standard, but is some form of connectivity. So this program would allow for improving service for those areas. Similar to the infrastructure program that Amy just mentioned, in Ohio for House Bill 2, for that program, applicants must be broadband providers. They must be existing broadband providers, which is exclusive of public sector providers. So public sector providers are not considered in this. But local governments can support and partner with a private internet service provider on an application. And that can be letters of support, that can be funding support to help bridge the gap and make an application more score higher. So there are ways that your community can partner with providers in your area to apply for these funds. There are some other parameters around plans for future service, and if there is service being built or planned in an area that may cause some eligibility issues, we're happy to provide some guidance and talk through that more. But that's an important program. The other is that the next one I want to mention is the Digital Equity Grant Program from Charter Spectrum. I bring this one up because it is very timely right now. You'll see that bottom bullet point that the application window for this year opened at the beginning of June and closes on June 25th. So we have a few weeks for folks to be able to apply for funds for this. As it says, it's open to 501c3 organizations, but again, local governments and other public sector partners can partner on applications and work together. The grant dollars are, you can see a range from pretty small micro grants of $2,500 up to $50,000. And we know that Ohio has been underrepresented in this funding in the past. And so we really want to encourage communities and partnerships to pursue this funding kind of for a range of digital inclusion projects and programs. So there's more information. We'll share the link to this program and to application materials so you can kind of see some of the types of projects and programs that might be eligible for that. And then the last two I'll mention quickly. I know that you all are thinking, our members and other public sector folks on the call are thinking about how to utilize the remaining CARES Act dollars that were allocated to local governments. Just as a reminder, you have through the end of the year to utilize those funds. And digital inclusion efforts are very eligible for that. What is great is we now have a number of case studies and examples from across the state of successful uses of CARES Act dollars to support digital inclusion efforts. So that can be building infrastructure, that can be a number of other types of programs to support digital inclusion. So as you're thinking about how to kind of program and time the funding, we would really encourage you to look at using CARES Act dollars first because they need to be used up by the end of the year. The ARP local government funds, you have through the end of 2024 to use those, so there's a bit more time to think about that. And we'd be happy to have some conversations about how to layer those funds onto each other to make most effective use of those. And then finally, I'll note for people kind of more central to the Central Ohio region, the Columbus Foundation has developed what they're calling the Central Ohio Digital Divide Fund that is now They've been able to pull together $1 million of funding, which is really incredible. That has been used to fund some studies and some other very specific efforts so far. I do not believe it is open for applications at this time, but I do want to let folks know that that funding from the philanthropic sector has been developed and that they are looking to provide ongoing support to digital inclusion efforts here in Central Ohio. So something to keep an eye on. And if we get more information about either an application window or other ways to access that funding, we'll certainly share that with you as well. So that is the quick rundown of those programs and sources. And so now on to two other items that, as I mentioned, are very late breaking. And for us here in Ohio, it is both a kind of bellwether day and also a bit of a low for digital equity all at the same time. So we're experiencing both the highs and lows here in the very near term. I'm going to start with the high and the really exciting news that earlier this morning in the Senate, Senator Rob Portman is one of the co-sponsors on the Digital Equity Act of 2021, which was introduced to the Senate this morning. This is a really, really exciting opportunity for digital equity. It's looking at over $1 billion of funding over the next 5 years to support a wide range of digital equity activities. You can see, I think Amy just posted the link. NDIA has put together a lot of resources on this. Again, this was just introduced, so is just beginning kind of the process of discussion and kind of working its way through the process. And I'll let Amy jump in if she has any more details to share about that in just a moment. The other thing I want to call out before we do that is kind of the flip side of the coin here in the state of Ohio. If anyone is tracking the state budget process, on Tuesday, there was an amendment introduced to the Senate's version of the state budget that effectively prohibits the development or operation of public sector broadband networks. This is a hugely concerning amendment for those of us working in digital equity, and frankly, raises a lot of concerns for MORPC and our membership along the lines of home rule and just the operation of municipalities and the ability to control municipal funding and operations. So we are continuing to collect information. There's supposed to be a vote. It's expected to be voted out of the Senate today. And then a conference committee will be created to reconcile the House and the Senate versions of the budget bill. Our effort will be to encourage, strongly oppose this and encourage that to be removed from whatever the final budget bill that goes through that conference committee. So we will be paying close attention to this over the next couple of weeks. You'll hear a more detailed update for those of you that will be on our commission call later this afternoon. Joe Garrity, our Director of Public and Government Affairs, will be providing a more detailed overview of that. But we are paying attention. If you have questions or would like more information, I'll be happy to follow up with that as well. So that's kind of the highs and lows here in Ohio for digital equity this week. Amy, anything more you want to add on the Digital Equity Act?
I think you covered it really well. We're just a bit of background. This was introduced in 2019. So this is its second reintroduction, and it's gaining a good bit of traction. Senator Patty Murray and then Senator Rob Portman from Ohio, of course, are co-sponsoring it. But recently, today, Senator Angus King signed on to co-sponsor as well. So it's got some good bipartisan support, and we're excited about that.
All right. Okay. My goodness. Thank you both. And all right, I'm going to kind of jump down in here. Yeah, and I hope that even when we do have established more rural broadband, that there'll be some opportunities to help people on the monthly bills. And once we get it there, then there's the question of how can we help people that may not be able to afford the service itself. So a lot's going on in this space for sure. So really appreciate all the advocacy efforts taking place. I'm going to grab my screen back real quick to go into the closing parts of our meeting, and really appreciate hearing from everybody today. So just a couple more things happening at MORPC. There we go. We will be announcing today, as a matter of fact, in just a couple hours, another opportunity for all of our members to receive a scholarship from Ohio University if they want to go back to school and work on a master's. So they're going to announce not only a master's in public administration, but also one in sustainability, security, and resilience, a brand new one that really very much in our space, things that we like to work on. Let's see. And so every employee in any member government is eligible for that $1,000 scholarship. So real nice benefit there. This will be coming up this summer. We're going to talk about rural governments, how to continue to look at your long-term future and how you'll be modernizing what's coming. A number of people are investing right now. So we want to look at long range. Where are we heading in our office environments for our rural communities and even our local communities? Cultivating your next leader. We want a broader representation in our governments to reflect the kinds of people that live in our communities. So we're going to talk about that. How do you go after some of these great leaders? You want to get active in policy and elected positions and maybe even running community organizations and so forth. Great panel. Then we're going to talk about those governments in rural areas that want to attract more private investment, what you might have to do in your zoning rules to encourage the kind of investment that you'd like. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll have a summer of social media, what's taking place in that space, how governments are using it effectively to engage their public. And then also, if there are any private members on the call here today and you want more opportunities to showcase your particular services, my colleague who did the logistics today, Amanda McEldowney, she does things so seamlessly, she will be also coordinating the State of the Region 2022 and the Fall Summit on Sustainability. So there will be opportunities to do sponsorships and things of that sort. I think they're coming to the end there. So thank you, everybody. We will give you links next week with the slides, the recordings if you'd like, and I think maybe some feedback. We'll ask you for some feedback. Thank you, speakers. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. We're going to close out today at 1 o'clock. Today will be a quick 30 minutes on transportation, how you get federal money for that. And then tomorrow at 10 will be Franklin County Soil and Water and SWACO. So thank you, everyone. We'll talk to you a little later.
Thank you, Eileen.
Thank you and have a great day.